I want you to take a second and look around. Whether you are sitting in a high-end coffee shop in Manhattan or scrolling through your feed in a quiet suburb, you are witnessing a magnificent multi-billion-dollar performance. Look at the person next to you. Notice the crispness of their designer shirt, the weight of the luxury watch on their wrist, and the silent purr of the European SUV waiting for them in the parking lot. It looks like success. It feels like the American dream. But if you could peel back the curtain of their bank app, you'd likely find a hollow shell. We are living in an era of optical wealth, where everyone is desperately trying to look rich while being one flat tire or one broken tooth away from total financial collapse. The numbers don't lie, even when people do. When researchers asked a room full of working adults if they could handle a basic $400 emergency, 1 out of every 3 people admitted they simply couldn't. Think about that. $400. That is less than the average monthly payment on the very cars they use to project an image of prosperity. It is a terrifying paradox. We are earning more than any generation in history, yet we are more fragile than ever. This isn't just a problem for the minimum wage worker. This fragility spans across 6-figure salaries and Ivy League degrees. It is a silent pandemic of lifestyle creep that turns high earners into sophisticated beggars. By the way, welcome back to the channel. I'm Robert. I've spent years obsessing over the mechanics of how money actually flows or fails to flow, so that I could build a better set of rules for personal financial management. I've been that guy, the one with the impressive title and the secret crushing anxiety of a looming credit card bill. And I learned the hard way that the difference between genuine financial peace and a lifetime of quiet desperation isn't luck or a massive inheritance. It is the fundamental, unsexy decisions we make every single day. Most people are completely blind to the specific behaviors that keep them shackled to their desks. They blame the economy, they blame their boss, or they blame bad timing, while the real culprits are hiding in plain sight, disguised as normal life. Today, we are going to dissect the 11 wealth-destroying patterns that are secretly sabotaging your future. Some of these will shock you because they aren't what the gurus talk about. Others will make you uncomfortable because you'll see them in your own mirror. But if you stay with me until the very end, I will show you exactly how to break these chains and finally start paying your future self what you are worth. If you find this perspective valuable, please consider subscribing to the channel to support our mission of bringing real financial clarity to the world. And if this message resonates with you, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear the truth. Now, let's get into the first reason why most people stay broke. The terrifying part isn't just the lack of a safety net, but the fact that most people are walking into this financial minefield without a single piece of equipment to guide them. This brings us to the first major reason people remain stuck. They are operating without any clear financial direction. Think about it for a moment. If you were planning a cross-country road trip from New York to Los Angeles, would you just hop in your car and start driving randomly, hoping that by some miracle you'd hit the Pacific Ocean? Of course not. You'd map out the route, identify the stops, and have a clear picture of exactly where you're headed. Yet, this haphazard, hope-for-the-best approach is exactly how most people handle their money. They earn, they spend, and they might even toss a few dollars into a savings account, but they have no specific financial destination in mind. I've realized through my own journey that without clear targets, every financial decision you make becomes completely arbitrary. When you don't have a big yes for your future, like being debt-free in 24 months or having a down payment for a home, it becomes impossible to say no to the small impulsive temptations of today. Financial goals provide the vital framework for making smart money decisions. When you have a target, every spending choice gets filtered through that objective. You stop asking, "Can I afford this?" and start asking, "Does this purchase move me closer to or further from my goal?" It's a subtle shift in language, but it's a radical shift in power. This lack of direction is compounded by the second wealth destroyer, a complete lack of preparation for life's inevitable surprises. We talk about that $400 emergency as if it's some freak occurrence, but the truth is that unexpected expenses are actually predictable in their unpredictability. Cars will break down. Appliances will fail. Medical issues will arise. These aren't if events, they are when events. When you haven't prepared for these entirely normal life occurrences, you're forced into desperate financial decisions, putting a repair on a high-interest credit card or borrowing from family. Each of these choices creates a new layer of stress that drags you further down. But perhaps the most insidious culprit is what I call the invisible leaks: living without a spending plan. Most people would never dream of running a business without tracking every cent of income and expenses, yet they run their personal lives with a level of carelessness that would bankrupt any company. You have a rough idea of what you earn and a vague sense of where it goes, but you lack the precise awareness that comes from monitoring the flow. This ignorance creates that sinking feeling we've all had. Getting paid, making what felt like reasonable purchases, and then wondering where the hell all the money went. It's those $5 coffees, the $15 subscription services you forgot you signed up for, and the impulse buys at the grocery store. Individually, they feel insignificant. Collectively, they are a massive transfer of wealth out of your pocket. These small leaks are the reason why the person earning $150,000 can feel just as broke as the person earning $50,000. It's not about how much is coming in, it's about how much you're letting slip through your fingers because you refuse to look at the numbers. Until you track the flow, you are not the master of your money, you are just its temporary custodian. But even when we start to see these leaks, there is something deeper and more primal in our brains that fights against the cure. A psychological anchor that keeps us tethered to the struggle. This is what behavioral scientists call present bias, and it is the fourth major reason people stay broke. We are biologically wired to prioritize the now over the later. There is an undeniable, intoxicating appeal to living entirely in the moment. We tell ourselves that life is short, that youth is fleeting, and that we deserve to enjoy the fruits of our labor while we are still young enough to appreciate them. On the surface, it sounds like a beautiful philosophy for life, but in the world of finance, it's a suicide note for your future self. When we fall into this trap, we make decisions as if our future selves simply do not exist. We treat that person, the one who will be 65, tired, and perhaps in need of medical care, like a total stranger whose problems aren't our concern. We spend money on immediate, fleeting pleasures while assuming that, somehow, through some stroke of luck or government intervention, our future financial needs will magically resolve themselves. I've realized that wealth building isn't about being miserly or sacrificing every ounce of joy today for a distant, grey tomorrow. It's about finding the maturity to balance present enjoyment with future security. Every time you overspend for a temporary high, you are essentially stealing from an older, more vulnerable version of yourself. To fuel this obsession with the present, most people turn to the most destructive tool in the modern world: consumer debt. This is the sixth reason on our list, and it's where the real tragedy happens because of a fundamental inability to distinguish between debt that builds and debt that destroys. Not all borrowing is the same, yet we treat it like a monolithic entity. Productive debt is a lever. It's a mortgage on a rental property that generates cash flow, or a loan for a high-value education that doubles your income. It helps you build wealth faster than you ever could by saving alone. Destructive debt, however, is a cancer. It is money borrowed to buy things that lose value the second you take them home. When you carry a balance on a credit card for a vacation, or take out a massive loan for a car that depreciates by 20% the moment you drive it off the lot, you aren't just paying for the item. You are paying the bank a premium for the privilege of being poorer. This type of debt enables us to live a lie, stretching our budgets far beyond sustainable limits and creating a level of chronic stress that suffocates our ability to think clearly or invest. We become trapped in a cycle of paying for our past mistakes with our future earnings, ensuring that we stay exactly where we are, broke, tired, and desperate for the next paycheck. But this destructive debt isn't just a financial tool gone wrong. It is often the fuel for a much deeper, more desperate social performance that we've all been conditioned to play. This brings us to a truth that is incredibly uncomfortable to admit. We frequently make our most significant purchasing decisions based on what others might think of us, rather than what actually makes financial sense. This is the seventh reason people remain financially stuck. And in the age of social media, it has become a defining characteristic of the modern consumer mindset. We've turned our lives into a stage, and our bank accounts are the ones paying for the expensive props. I want you to really think about the last major purchase you made. Was it driven by a practical need, or was it a silent message to the world? We see this phenomenon repeat itself every single day. A person leases a luxury car they can barely afford because they believe it projects an image of prosperity to their neighbors. Another person buys a designer handbag or an oversized house not for the quality or the space, but because they want their colleagues to perceive them as having made it. The psychological trap here is insidious because many of us have convinced ourselves that looking successful is a prerequisite for actually being successful. We believe that if we dress the part, drive the right car, and live in the right zip code, opportunities will naturally flow our way. But here is the biting irony that I've discovered through years of studying the truly wealthy. They often display the exact opposite behavior. The real millionaires, the ones with actual freedom, are often driving 10-year-old Toyotas, wearing modest clothing, and living in houses that are comfortable rather than impressive. They understand a fundamental law of wealth that the average person misses. Every dollar you spend on the appearance of being rich is a dollar that is no longer working to actually make you rich. Meanwhile, those who are struggling the most are often the ones spending the most money trying to hide that struggle. It's an expensive form of self-deception. This appearance-focused spending creates a vicious cycle where the more you spend on the facade, the less you have for the foundation. Eventually, maintaining the performance becomes so costly that it prevents you from ever achieving the very success you're trying to project. You become trapped in a social cage, working a job you might hate just to pay for a lifestyle that only exists to impress people who, quite frankly, aren't even paying attention to you. It is a hollow victory, and it's one of the fastest ways to ensure you stay broke for the rest of your life. Until you can break free from the need for external validation, you will always be a slave to the expectations of others, and your financial freedom will remain nothing more than a distant, flickering dream. Once you stop performing for a world that isn't even watching, you finally free up the mental and financial bandwidth to execute the single most important shift in the history of your bank account. This is the moment we stop paying everyone else first and start the pay yourself first revolution. For years, I followed the traditional broken formula. I'd get my paycheck, pay the landlord, pay the utility companies, buy the groceries, grab a few drinks with friends, and then look at what was left over for my future. The problem, as I'm sure you've experienced, is that there was never anything meaningful left. Life has an insidious way of expanding your expenses to perfectly consume every available dollar of your income. If your own financial security is the last priority on your list, it will inevitably get nothing at all. To break this cycle, you have to flip the sequence entirely. You must treat your savings and investments not as an afterthought, but as an essential, non-negotiable invoice that must be paid before anyone else gets a cent. This is where automation becomes your greatest ally. I realized that my willpower is a finite resource, and I'm much more likely to spend what I see. So, I set up automatic transfers that move a predetermined amount into my investment accounts the second my paycheck hits. By the time I even think about buying a coffee or paying a bill, that money is already gone, working for my future self. It forces a healthy kind of artificial poverty that makes you more creative, more disciplined, and more selective with what's left. But paying yourself is only half the battle. You also have to rethink your relationship with risk. Many people stay broke because they are so terrified of losing money that they miss every opportunity to grow it. They keep their life savings in a standard bank account, earning 0.1% interest, feeling safe, while inflation quietly erodes their purchasing power by 3% or 5% every year. I've come to understand that in a world of constant currency devaluation, playing it safe is actually the riskiest move you can make. Real wealth building isn't about gambling or avoiding risk entirely. It's about learning to manage calculated risks, investing in assets that offer a reasonable reward while protecting you from catastrophe. When you prioritize your future and manage risk intelligently, you stop being a passive victim of the economy and start becoming a deliberate architect of your own freedom. Even when you master the art of paying yourself first and managing risk, you still hit a ceiling if you don't address the most fundamental limitation of the modern worker, the trap of trading time for dollars. This is the 10th wealth-destroying pattern on our list. Most people think about income in a strictly linear fashion. They believe that if they want more money, they simply have to work more hours. But time is the only truly finite resource we have. If your income is tied to your physical presence, you have a hard cap on your freedom. Truly wealthy individuals understand that financial independence only arrives when you develop multiple streams of income that don't require your direct time investment. Whether that's rental properties, dividend stocks, or a side business that runs on systems. Making this transition requires a radical identity shift. You have to stop seeing yourself as a consumer who works for a paycheck and start seeing yourself as an owner who builds assets. This shift is often unsexy and requires immense sacrifice. It might mean spending your weekends building a digital product or living in a smaller apartment for 3 years to save for your first investment property. It's about being willing to do what others won't for a few years, so you can live like others can't for the rest of your life. But none of this is possible without the final and perhaps most critical pillar: continuous financial education. Most people stop learning about money the moment they leave school. They operate on outdated advice and fall prey to predatory financial products because they lack the literacy to evaluate them. The world of money is constantly evolving. Tax laws change, new markets emerge, and inflation shifts. If you aren't a student of the game, you are a victim of it. Your financial future isn't determined by your current salary or your past mistakes. It is determined by the decisions you start making today. Choose to break free from the patterns that keep the majority broke. Stop performing, start owning, and join the quiet minority who achieve genuine freedom. The question isn't whether these principles work. The math proves they do. The only question is whether you are disciplined enough to apply them.